I've changed so much since my last devlog, I'm probably going to forget something big. But for example, I've increased the resolution of the game because the kitchen started to feel too crowded with the notebook and the tastelizer covering up large portions of it. And I've also made the tastelizer a probe that you can now leave in place to monitor something while you're free to drag other objects around. I feel like that makes it a lot easier to multitask. There's even some new equipment that I'll briefly touch on later, but the main thing I've been focusing on, and the reason I haven't released a new prototype yet, is making the challenge aspect of the game more satisfying, because once I got past the critical bugs and started playing the game, it all felt a bit random and arbitrary. I've given a lot of thought to game design, and basically I feel like there are two main criteria for making a challenge satisfying: giving the player predictable control over the outcome, and also providing enough feedback and information to know what they're trying to do. So for example, back to the flavor criteria, I've decided to make that mostly come from what ingredients you pick, and not to radically change the flavor profile as you do things to the food. Whoops, I forgot I already talked about that part last time, but I'm taking that thought process further now to try to make everything a little bit more predictable so you can be more strategic instead of just doing a lot of trial and error. I've also added a blander tool, which just makes the food more bland. It reduces different flavors so that you have one more tool to help rein in whatever flavor balance you're trying to achieve. To provide feedback, of course, there's the tastelizer readout, there's the notebook that lets you preview things, and of course the judges will give you commentary. For texture, I'm also trying to make things less random by simplifying the finite state machine so that there's a smaller number of possible outcomes from each process. Another complication is the order of events used to matter for what texture you would get, but in the notebook you can't really specify what order of reactions you want to preview. So I've changed that, and now it doesn't matter what order you do things in. If you particulate it and cook it, you'll always get the same texture no matter what order you do it in. In trying to make things more predictable, I've also given some thought to metagame progression. I don't mean things that you unlock from game to game, which I do plan on having, but what you learn from game to game to make you better at Galactic Chef. I don't want you to feel like you have to memorize anything, and that's why the notebook is there to provide pretty much all the information you could need, but you'll be faster if you know in advance what you can do to achieve a desired result. Moving on, there are now 5 categories for your score: flavor, texture, ambition, technical execution, and the challenge's specific criteria. Ambition is a score of how many ingredients and processes you use, so that you don't just put one ingredient on the plate if it happens to already have a good flavor profile. Technical will measure things like whether the meat is cooked to an appropriate temperature without being overcooked, but also some other things in the future which I'll probably talk about in the next devlog. Meanwhile, I finally added some new challenge types, so instead of always just using a specific ingredient, sometimes you'll get a challenge to make a dessert, or a beverage, or something green, or something that uses the particulator. Just enough different challenges to encourage you to explore all the different aspects: textures, flavors, portion size, color, etc. I've also completely rebuilt the judge commentary system, so that you don't have to click through 3 lines with the judges all saying the same basic thing. If they're all in agreement, it'll show that all on the screen at the same time, and then any disagreements will be shown afterward. And the thing that I'm working on right now and not quite finished with is rebuilding the ingredient generation yet again to ensure that for every flavor there's at least one ingredient available that's predominantly that flavor, so that you can always reach any desired combination of flavors somehow. And I've got a lot of big ideas that I probably shouldn't go into because I gotta save something to talk about next time. So to wrap this up, I do want to mention that I finally solved all my debugging and workflow issues on Mac. Turns out that the latest version of Godot was signed in a way that didn't allow debuggers to attach to it, but that's easy enough to fix. You can remove the code signing or re-sign it yourself. And I've also set up my workflow better in Visual Studio Code so that I can just hit F5 and it will rebuild and run under the debugger. I got a helpful tip in the comments for how to run my project from the command line without having to export a build, and it's something I should have looked up a long time ago, but it's just one of those cases where tunnel vision can stop you from realizing something that would have made your life easier if you did it sooner. Unfortunately, I can't show you that right now because my iMac is actually in a shop getting upgraded to an SSD, another thing that I should have done a long time ago. And this will be the first time in a long time I'm editing my video on Windows, so it might look a little bit different because I don't have my template project handy, but whatever, it doesn't matter, right? So I guess that's it for this week. Sorry it's been so long between videos and so long between prototypes, but I hope to have a prototype ready soon. I just want to make sure that the game makes sense to me first before I waste other people's time looking at it. I figured there's a limited number of times people will want to try out an unfinished game before they want to just wait for it to actually be finished so they can play an actual good game. So as always, it really helps me out if you hit the like button, spread the word, and subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, thanks for watching.